going to talk first of all to Steve calling from Lakewood, California. Hi, Steve. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve, for giving me the opportunity to be able to call in. I really appreciate you and your ministry. Hey, my question, I'll try to make it real concise here, is about the origination of dispensationalism through John Nelson Darby, 1830, and not even 200 years old. I talked to a dispensationalist the other night, and he told me that wasn't true. And I said, how so? And he said, well, Darby wasn't the originator or creator of dispensationalism. He said it was actually always a thing. And I said, well, how can you prove that to me? And he said, well, if you'll go on and find St. Irenaeus' book on heresies, book number 5, and I found it and I read it. It was a pretty lengthy book, 35 chapters. He said that he knew the apostles personally, some of them, and he wrote of the pre-tribulation rapture, and Darby brought it back into existence. He didn't actually create it. And he also said that Justin Martyr, Clemens of Alexandria, and St. Ignatius also agreed with that, and they knew some of the apostles. So my first question, is this true? My second question, I'm familiar with Polycarp, who was discipled by John the Apostle, but did these men really know any of the apostles other than Polycarp?
Some people think that not only Polycarp but also Papias knew the Apostle John. Irenaeus did not know the Apostle John. Irenaeus lived much too late for that, but he did know Polycarp. So Polycarp knew John, and Irenaeus knew Polycarp. That is the connection there. I believe that Ignatius also is thought to have perhaps known Polycarp, but not necessarily John. So that's, there's some question about whether any of the church fathers, other than Polycarp and Papias, and probably Clement of Rome, probably also knew some of the apostles, at least Paul. So, there are some of those. Now, Irenaeus was a premillennialist, but I don't believe you'll find a pre-trib rapture in his writings. There's a couple of, let me put it this way. If you want to know whether dispensationalism, as we know it today, originated in the 1830s by John Nelson Darby, you simply have to get any book, look up the word in any encyclopedia, find any responsible website, and everyone knows that dispensationalism, the system that is dominant in much of the evangelical church today, was originated by John Nelson Darby. Now, his system did incorporate some points that were made by some earlier church fathers, or at least something like them. I think there were some of the earlier Christians before Darby that thought that there would be a rapture like either 3.5 years before the second coming. I don't know if there were any who thought it'd be 7 years like Darby did, but there are a few people. They were not in the mainstream, that is, they weren't in the majority, but there were some who did have some kind of an idea similar to a pre-trib rapture. There also were some, and they were not in the majority either, who believed that Israel would be restored in the end times, which is a very important Darbyite view and dispensational view. The difference being that the church fathers, and Irenaeus was one of them actually, who believed that the Jews would be returning to their land in the end times, they didn't believe this was going to be God's doing. They didn't believe that God had unfulfilled promises to Israel that he had to keep, which is what dispensationalism teaches. They taught that the Antichrist is going to bring them back, and it's going to be a judgment on Israel, not a fulfillment of some divine mercy on them. That Irenaeus and a few others that I've read, I think Hippolytus also, did believe that, and specifically said the Antichrist is going to bring the Jews back to Israel. Okay, now that was not taught by very many by very many church fathers, including some that were earlier than Irenaeus, like Tertullian, or I should say Justin Martyr, and some others. They did not believe that. In fact, they thought that was a carnal idea. So the dispensational system isn't simply someone saying, well, here's someone who said there's going to be a rapture before the tribulation, or here's somebody who said the Jews are going to come back to their land. Those are very important dispensational points. But in most cases, the few persons earlier than Darby who said them were not in step with the majority of the thinking of the church, and they did not put things together like Darby did. See, what Darby came up with was a system. When you read Irenaeus and his eschatology, it's really scattered. And so, same thing with Hippolytus. I've read them both. And, they believed there's going to be a millennium, but they didn't believe what Darby believed. Darby believed the temple system and the Levitical priesthood will be set up in the millennium, that the Jewish religion will be re-established there. Early church fathers didn't believe any such thing. They believed Judaism was done and that Jesus had replaced it, of course, because that's what the New Testament tells us. So what you'll find is that in some of the earlier writers than Darby, a very small number, some points that sound a lot like Darby's points are found, but you'll never find the system that Darby came in. And Darby knew that. Darby actually said that he was rediscovering truths that no one had remembered since the time of the apostles. He made a very original system, and this is the system that's called dispensationalism today. So, and anyone can prove that to themselves by looking up the history of dispensationalism in an encyclopedia or on an online source.
Yeah, Darby's the creator and originator of the 7 dispensations of God.
Well, of the whole system that included that. Yeah, I mean, he had this premillennial, this form of premillennialism that had a restoration of the Jewish temple and animal sacrifices in the Levitical priesthood during the millennium. Now, Irenaeus and Hippolytus and Tertullian and many early church fathers believed there would be a millennium, but they did not believe there'd be a restoration of Jewish practices in the millennium. That was strictly Darby. And most of them did not believe in a pre-trib rapture. I don't know of any church father before Darby who said that there are unfulfilled promises that God has not fulfilled to Israel that need to be fulfilled in the end times. So, I mean, these are the core issues in Darby's view, which is held by dispensationalists today. And it was not, like I said, there's some things that were kind of quasi similar to Darby's ideas, but he was very original, and he claimed to be. He didn't say, "Hey, I'm teaching what all the church fathers have taught before me." He taught that he was not. He said that he had rediscovered something that they had lost already after the apostles died. So your friend has heard someone say things like that, and I think your friend has confused some of the issues. There are a couple of books that have come out, which I've read, by dispensationalists that argue for dispensational ideas before Darby's time. One is called Dispensationalism Before Darby. You can just go to Amazon, look it up, Dispensationalism Before Darby. And that largely is a book quoting, it's mostly focusing on Puritan writers and things that some of them said, which was before Darby's time, maybe a century before Darby's time, that sounded a lot like Darby's points on some issues. But again, when you look at them closely, they're not saying the same thing. And they were out of step with the majority at the time anyway, so it wasn't really the teaching of the church or anything like that. The other book is called, Ancient Dispensational Truth, I think it's called. Ancient Dispensational Truth. And that book goes back to the church fathers and quotes them extensively. And I've read that one too. And one thing I noticed as I, analyzed the text is that they had very few church fathers that they could quote at all to sound anything like Darby. And then on the points where they did sound like Darby a little bit, they had a different view entirely. And primarily that Darby believed that all of prophecy centers around God fulfilling Abrahamic promises to the Jews in the end times. And, some of the early church fathers, a handful of them at the very most, thought that Israel would come back to the land in the last days, but they said it was going to be the Antichrist doing it, not God fulfilling his promises. So they thought it was going to be a judgment that God was bringing on Israel through the Antichrist. Now, dispensationalists today will sometimes say that, but they also get it confused with the idea that God's bringing them back to Israel to fulfill promises. So I think they're trying to incorporate some of what Irenaeus and others said with their own Darbyite views of, there's these unfulfilled promises that have to be fulfilled to Israel, though the New Testament disagreed with that.
Thank you, Steve. You're a very kind gentleman. Appreciate it.
Okay, Steve, thanks for your call. Good talking to you. Well, we have next two callers also, like Steve, are from California. This is Nelson calling from San Diego. Hi, Nelson. Welcome.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to make a comment here briefly. I've read your book, The Four Views of Revelation and The Three Views of Hell, and they're really very good. They're very exhaustive, but they're easy to read. I think that's the point I wanted to make. It's enjoyable to read. And I recently picked up the 2-volume set of The Empire of the Risen Sun.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm glad to hear.
Man, you knocked it out of the park there, brother. I really appreciate that read. And it's a great resource. I like the hard copy version. You can mark it up and everything. Mm-hmm. So I would just recommend that to any of your listeners, that it's kind of a must read for any disciple-looking person. And then the best news probably is your Matthew713.com site.
Mm-hmm. I don't get any credit for that. Yeah, others have worked on that.
Yeah, but you can download, you can print out certain passages of the Bible, and it's just a really incredible resource. And I just wanted to give you a shout out for that, and it's an awesome read. Thanks, brother.
Well, I appreciate those commendations. God bless you, and thanks for your call. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Matthew713.com is a tremendous resource, Matthew713.com. It's got a topical index where you can listen to up to 25,000 previous calls from this show, topically arranged in an index. You can also look them up not by the topic, but by the scriptures that are in the calls. And in addition to that, the same website also has all my lecture notes, at least all the ones I've got. And so, you don't need to write to me to say, could you send me the notes for this or that lecture? Just go to Matthew713.com. They're there. You can print them out. It's a great resource. I agree on that. And I do appreciate you saying that about my books. I of course, hope very much that would be how people would find them, easy to read. And also, of course, I would agree that the books Empire of the Risen Sun are the most important. You said a must read. I would agree. I think they are kind of a must read for Christians, even though I am the author. But if I had read them and I wasn't the author, I would say, I wish everyone could read these books. That's why I wrote them, because they're things I wish everyone would read.